Sanitarium 2013. Hello everyone and welcome. Our movie starts with a psychiatrist Henry Stenson talking about insanity, where he says, "It's a disease that spreads in the mind, generating disturbed and dysfunctional thoughts in the human brain and makes us commit terrible acts beyond the ordinary. It is transmitted from person to person without regard to gender, race, age, or beliefs, which leads to inconceivable results that we can't accept or understand." Patient 49 had a tragic story after he lost everyone he ever loved. Art is an extremely objective way of seeing what we want to see with painting, writing, or sculpture. This artist, called Gas, incarnates his art with these sculptures and treats them as characters with a soul like any other artist. He has a friend named Matthew who visits him frequently, and Sam is his close friend and the main supporter of his art sculptures to become famous. So he got for him a $6 million deal. But despite this success, he doesn't seem to care as much about his success as he does about the sculptures, so he had to consider this deal. When he came back to the sculptures, and while he was taking pleasure in speaking to them, he heard a very strong sound. But it turned out that it was a sound coming out of his head. So he went to take his meds to relieve the sound and headaches and come back to talk to them. It seems that he speaks to these sculptures in an abnormally exaggerated way. Even when he's sleeping, he doesn't sleep normally. He goes back and starts talking to them till morning. His friend Matthew walked in and found him this way, told him about the deal, but Gas refused. But Matthew said he was at his side anyway. Gas therefore decided to visit Sam at night, and right before that, he went to the sculptors to talk about that. He imagined the sculptors telling him that Sam was trying to steal them. So when he arrived, he pretended he dropped his keys, and Sam tried to pick them up, holding Gus, but Gus left him. So he fell from floor to floor and died straight away. Sam's wife heard his sound, and when she came in, she found her husband dead. But Gus hit her with his hard face too. Suddenly, he found himself in his bed. He thought it was a nightmare, but there was blood on his hands. So he went directly to Matthew's house and knocked on the door while he was busy with his wife. Matthew reassured him that it was all going on in his mind. Then he went to Sam and found him safe and well. Once back, Matthew found him tying his wife with a rope around her neck and getting ready to hang her. So he pushed the stool under her feet. Matthew tried to save her, but he failed. Then Gus shot himself with a gun. Strangely enough, Matthew began to hear the voices of the sculptors speaking to him and accusing him of being the cause of all this. Coming back to the sanitarium, Dr. Henry says, "It's said that art embodies life, but maybe it's actually art that manipulates life." This nurse brought these sculptures in front of Matthew in presence of Dr. Henry. And when he opened the bag, he began to hear voices from the sculptures and began to shout non-stop. Then Henry continued, "Who is the doll and who is the master?" Meaning who is in control and who is being controlled. This journalist came to the librarian to ask him for a file of a very interesting case he wants to discuss in an article. So the librarian gave him the number 26. Once he found the file and turned on the recorder, he found a recording of Dr. Stenson talking about a patient with catatonic schizophrenia, which is one of the most distressing cases has ever had since coming to the hospital. This kid's name is Steven. His outward appearance suggests he's a brilliant kid, but his mind wanders a lot on the way and throughout the lesson and in many places. So the teacher asked his mother to come and discuss his condition. However, he said he only lived with his father. As to the reason of his wandering, it's this man who everywhere he goes, he sees him following him. While the dad doesn't seem like a polite person because he smokes and drinks beer in front of his son and forces him to do the cooking, and if he doesn't, he hits him with a belt. The next day, as the children were eating their meals in the schoolyard, one of their classmates came to show them something by stealth. And when they arrived, he showed them a porn magazine. But their classmate told them somebody was coming. The rest of the boys escaped. However, Stephen was caught by somebody with teeth that looked like shark teeth. The same man who found him around. But once he heard the voice of the teacher, he left him. The teacher found the poor magazine with Stephen, so she called his dad. When he arrived, she showed him the magazine, but he considered it something trivial and worthless. Then she asked him about the marks on his neck, as they were the result of a beating by an adult. So the father told her it was none of your business. Then she went to the director and asked for Stephen's address, claiming that he had forgotten his things. When the father arrived home with the child, he began to blame him for his behavior and asked him to answer him about the reason for those marks on his neck. Then he showed him pictures from the magazine, but the child spat in his father's face. So the father threw him in his room and promised him that he would beat him again. The child hurried to close the door. Outside, the teacher was standing by her car and watching. Stephen's bed began to tremble, and this shark-toothed monster came out of bed and showed up. When the father knocked on the door, he asked him to be silent. He covered him with a bag and went to the father and beat him without stopping. The teacher heard voices there and called the police. Inside, the monster put an end to the father's life. As for the teacher, she couldn't control herself and entered, but the monster hit her. And when the police got there, they found two bodies, one of the father and the other of the teacher. Here we see Stephen as he grew up in the sanitarium. Stenson says the police weren't exactly sure what happened at that time, but soon after, the child joined us in the sanitarium. For protection from such terrible things, the mind is incredibly resistant and can create completely imaginary worlds to protect us from reality and blind us from the truth. And the greater the horror, the greater the imagination with it. On the other hand, imagination can be more real than anyone could imagine. This person is called James. The doctor asked his name and he replied. He told him why you came here. James said, I don't know. The doctor told him to think about it. He said, I can't recall. James wakes up in the morning in his basement. Today is the 640th. He wears headphones to play music. Then as part of his daily routine, he checks the condition of his underground farm from which he feeds. He went to read a verse from the Bible, Matthew 24:13. One who stands firm to the end will be saved. Here we find him talking about the end of the 5,125-year cycle called by the Mayans as the Biaktun, which is the cycle of the end of the world and its beginning again. And he believes strongly in it and doesn't think it's a hoax or a conspiracy. And he sounded pretty smart, as the basement in which he lives has a very complex and integrated ecosystem. This is his wife, Allison, and these are his kids. But here he says he's alone. Like what we saw was memories of the past. Here he remembers how he started digging his own shelter, but his wife was dissatisfied with that, as he used up all their savings. Even his students didn't seem convinced of what he thought. He heard a voice from the basement entrance calling him, but he tried to resist and began to shout, but this voice never stopped. It reminded him that his children died at times, and at other times it reminded him of an attack as if were an attack by aliens. And at other times he remembers how his wife called an ambulance to be transferred to the sanitarium. In short, the movie reflects what a patient with insanity suffers. Each of these cases lived in an illusion, but it seems so real to them that it left them with a psychological and physical impact. James was paranoid and he felt very strongly that someone was conspiring against him. He was an intelligent man, but his troubled mind convinced him he was right. Thanks for watching. See you in the next video.